Good morning. It's really my distinct pleasure to be here. I spent 14 years at UAB. I really enjoyed coming to this meeting, and it's great to see that it's still a wonderful place for trainees to present. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the American Board of Surgery and some changes that are underfoot and what this really means for the practicing surgeon today and in the future. My disclosure, I am a director of the American Board of Surgery. Some of my slides I got from the American Board of Surgery, and then some of the opinions are my own as well. So I had the great good fortune of knowing Dr. Henry Laws as I was practicing at UAB, and I interacted with him because we were working on a statewide collaborative to reduce surgical site infection. And he was such a wonderful gentleman, scholar, master educator, and I also worked with Dr. Ronnie Clements, who was one of Dr. Laws' disciples, and those are two really, really great losses, I think, for American surgery. But Dr. Laws was a great clinician and educator and innovator and had really a legacy of improving care for surgical patients. And he was, I think, always up to date and the head of the curve. Despite being in practice for nearly 40 years, he was practicing state-of-the-art medicine and surgery. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, what it means to practice medicine and surgery in the 21st century. What does the board do in that process, and what's going on with maintenance of certification? So I know there's a lot of trainees in the room, so I kind of, and I heard you did some mock orals on Saturday, so I'll talk a little bit about the program and where it's going. So as everybody, I think most people in this room know, in order to practice medicine in the United States, you have to go to a medical school, you have to pass exams. The requirements are different by state in order to get state licensure. But those are some bare minimums, right, in order to be able to practice medicine. And then in order to practice surgery in the United States, there are a few other requirements. You have to get privileges at your local institution. To practice surgery, you have to have an active license, and they do background checks. And then beyond that, each individual hospital or facility has their own privileging process, and many of them require board certification. And now many boards have gone to a continuous certification, so it's not enough to just get your initial certification. And this has caused a fair amount of angst among practicing physicians and surgeons because the requirements for all three of these, licensure, credentialing, and now continuous certification, are increasing. And they often don't overlap, and it's hard to keep track of what you have to do for what body in order to continue to take care of your patients. So, and on top of that, there's a big business out there now in regulating physicians and how we practice, and there's a lot of consumer-driven ones that are trying to rate the quality of care that we deliver, and they don't have a lot of good measures to figure out, whether your surgeon is a good surgeon or a bad surgeon, but that doesn't stop them from publishing things about us and trying to further influence and accelerate the improvement in quality of care. And patients, like everything, are much more consumer-driven, right? They're trying to figure out how to find out if their doctor is a good doctor. And so what do they use? They use references, personal references, whether they like the way their doctor talks to them. So we get a lot of likelihood to recommend, and a lot of attention is paid to that because we know that matters to patients. The second thing that matters to them is whether or not you're board certified. And 95% say that maintaining board certification is an important factor that they look for in their doctor, and then recommendation from family and friends. But we should have more than kind of a Yelp or an Angie's List or likelihood to recommend, really to verify that our surgeons that are out in practice are really up to date and current in their practice. So patients are checking. The American Board of Surgery website gets over 24,000 visits a month, patients checking to see if their surgeon is board certified. So how do we assure the public that their surgeon, we, are up to date? The American Board of Surgery was really founded for this purpose in 1937 and was founded by several leading surgical societies to differentiate formally trained surgeons who go through an accredited residency program from other doctors in practice. So it was really something that it was founded to be something that verified that you were a trained surgeon. and really was to protect the public from surgeons who weren't trained or weren't adequately up to date in their practice. And it was the American Board of Surgery was one of the first boards. So it used to be if you were certified, it was a lifelong certificate. But in 1976, the American Board of Surgery said, you know, the practice is probably evolving. We probably need to do something at some interval to make sure that people, our surgeons in practice that we certified, are still up to date. So in 1976, they were one of the first boards to reinstitute recertification exams. And so this is the American Board of Surgery today. There's 31,000 diplomates of the American Board of Surgery. 94% of them hold a general surgery certificate. That's changing as we see primary certificates in vascular surgery coming on board. And 95% of the certified surgeons are in some type of maintenance or continuous certification. The directors still make up representatives, are represented by many of our regional and national societies, and I pointed to Dr. Reed Adams here in the back, who is the director that is representing the Southeastern Surgical Congress. So for the trainees in the room, initial certification hasn't changed that much. You have to take a high-stakes exam, secure exam in a room. It's now given in July, and fellowships are pushed back to August. And because of that change, we're actually seeing an increase in pass rate. So it used to be you moved, you started your fellowship, and then you had to take time away to go take an exam in August. And now that most residents, after completing residency, have a month to kind of study for the exam and take it, we actually are seeing the pass rates go up a little bit, which I think is a great thing. The certifying exam is the mock oral exam, which you did. It's very similar to the format that you did it. It's still 3 rooms, 4 questions per room, but there's been a lot of changes for those of us who took it a long time ago in terms of the way these exams are given. So now it's a standardized exam. The questions are picked out to make sure that they are an appropriate mix of complex and straightforward questions, that they're an appropriate mix of covering the breadth of general surgery. And each room has 2 examiners, and now the examiners don't discuss the candidate, they just each score independently. We have now a standardized set of associate examiners. It used to be if we held the boards in a certain area, we would just kind of ask for volunteers to come in and give the exam, and some people had experience doing it and some didn't. So there's a lot more attention actually on those of us giving the exam, that we give a fair exam. We know whether we're a hawk or a dove. There's some corrections made for that, but there's a lot, and we're observed. So sometimes when we're giving the exams, we're observed. So I think it's become a much fairer exam as well. So once you're certified, like we said, the American Board of Surgery instituted that you had to go through some type of reassessment, and it used to be a 10-year high-stakes recertification exam, meaning the same thing. You'd have to go to a secure testing center, take an exam and pass it, and it was fairly intense and not a great experience for many diplomates, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. And then in 2005, it was felt that just a 10-year exam wasn't enough. We needed to have some interval assessments that surgeons between that 10-year exam were maintaining their certification. And so we came these 4 parts of what we called MOC, or maintenance of certification, including professional standing. So you had to say that you were privileged and credentialed, you didn't have any issues with your licensure. And then this lifelong learning and self-assessment. So this increase in CME credits that you had to turn into the board every 3 years, including a number of self-assessment CMEs, which started a whole cottage industry of self-assessment CME. And then cognitive expertise is that exam, that 10-year exam, and then evaluation of your practice performance, meaning you had to be participating in some type of practice improvement. And so the increased burdens of the MOC, along with local hospital credentialing and state and federal regulations, were really major dissatisfiers for our diplomates, not only in surgery, but even more so in some of our other subspecialties. And on top of that, there was minimal evidence that doing all this stuff really was associated with staying up to date in your current practice and improved patient outcomes. Because that 10-year exam was pretty broad, and you might have a pretty narrow practice. And so you would just be studying things to practice and to pass that exam. So all these things have kind of led to a crisis among diplomates and saying, why do I need to stay certified? And particularly, there was an issue with the American Board of Internal Medicine because they were selling their self-assessment CMEs, but requiring it of their diplomates and charging very high fees of their diplomates, both for their CME self-assessment, but as in their dues. And this led to some proposed alternative board movements. So there's the American Board of Medical Specialties, which ABS is one of the member participants, but there's an alternative board movement that there's another body that says, hey, we can certify people and we can do it for less and we'll have different requirements. And there's been a lot of legislative challenges in states like Texas and others to say that it's not, you can't require certification for privileging, like hospitals cannot use this, and trying to get state legislatures to pass that. So there's been kind of a lot of attack on certification, what's its value to the diplomate, but also what's its value to the public. So the ABS responded to the diplomat concerns by first by surveying and seeing what's out there. What is it that diplomats like about ABS? We only came in contact with the ABS every 10 years when we had to take that high stakes exam. And what we learned is that we needed to really make sure that maintenance of certification was more convenient and reflective of surgeons' daily practice. So if you're primarily a breast surgeon and you're taking an exam that is, 20% trauma critical care questions that you never really see, do you really need to stay up to date in that area? And so we sent a survey to our diplomates in the fall of 2016, and what our diplomates wanted was a more flexible, less burdensome, and practice-related process. So this initial new direction in 2017, so we changed, so you don't have to report every 3 years, now you report every 5 years on your CME and professional standing and practice assessment, and it's an online process. We reduced the number of self-assessment CMEs. That was a big dissatisfier among diplomates. Many people didn't feel that the questions were really well written. There are many different venues that you could get it from, but it was a little more of a hassle to keep up with it. And but there still is a requirement in the old maintenance of certification to have at least 12 or an average of 10 self-assessment CMEs per year. So this is going to change a little bit in the new program. So there's some people are going to be the old program, some people are in the new program, so I'm going to tell you both. So practice improvement is staying the same, ongoing participation in some type of local, regional, and national outcomes registry, and keeping an operative log so that it can be reflective of your current practice when you submit your requirements. You still need to have a full and unrestricted license. You need to have privileges if you are in active practice, and 2 references. So most of this is the same requirements. So the next thing we really wanted to do was tackle this 10-year exam, because we really recognized that an exam every 10 years was probably not really reflective of whether surgeons were staying up to date in practice. That practice changes were happening much quicker than that. And that the exam wasn't really tailored to the individual surgeon's practice. So we again surveyed our diplomates on this one, and we got a 33% response rate, which is okay, not great. But what we heard is that most surgeons wanted an open book exam. They didn't want to go to a testing center, and they wanted a lower stakes exam that was more consistent with adult learning. And they definitely said they would not want to complete the assessment any more than every 2 years. So 67% said, about 2 years seemed about right if you had a low stakes exam that you could take at home. And wanted to be tested on some core concepts of general surgery, but really have an exam that was more tailored to their individual practice. So what we did is quickly this year came up with a new exam. So anybody who was recertifying this year or who wanted to just come into the continuous certification process took the exam this last October. And it's a 40-question open book exam. You take it at home on your computer. It's 20 questions are core general surgery that every examinee takes, and 20 questions can be practice related, and we currently have modules in general surgery, abdomen, alimentary tract, and breast. And those were the exams that we gave this year. And the idea is to, as we go forward, is to develop more of those practice related content for that half of the exam. And so the continuous certification is contingent now on passing an exam every other year. So rather than a 10-year exam, high stakes, at a testing center, it's an every 2-year exam, 40 questions at home on your computer. And the reason to make this change is that it really reflects a rapid change in surgical knowledge and practice. It's a more ongoing and modern way of assessing education and staying up to date. And it really is, I think, more passes, the public's perception of how we're making sure that our diplomates are staying up to date. So again, it's open book. There's no time limit per question. So what happens is you enroll, and it's in the fall. And once you start the exam, you have 2 weeks to finish it. So it's a 40-question exam. So as soon as you log in and you take the first question, you have to complete the entire exam within 2 weeks. But there's no time limit per question. You can take the exam, you can start, you can stop. And as you answer each question, you get immediate feedback with whether you got the right answer or not. And then there's a kind of a justification for why answers were right or wrong, but not telling you what the right answer was. And again, you can take this on your own computer. And the test is based on references that are published and available to the diplomates on the website. So before you take the exam, you could go and download all the reference materials and read them. They're available to you free to study for the exam, or you could kind of learn as you go. So the way that exam is scored is that the second attempt to answer incorrectly, there's a second attempt to answer any incorrect answer. So your first time through, you have to get 40% correct. If you don't get 40% correct, you don't get a chance to answer any other questions. You failed the exam. But if you got at least 40% correct, which means 16 questions out of 40, then you would get the ones that you got incorrect sent back to you for a second attempt. And on the second attempt, you needed to get at least 80% correct. And so you had up to 2 attempts to pass the assessment. So you must pass an assessment every other year, and we talked a little bit about this 2-week exam window. And if you are unsuccessful, you can retake the assessment the following year. You'll stay certified, but you do need to pass it the next year. And if you are unsuccessful in passing this exam 2 years in a row, then you would have to revert back to that secure exam in a testing center. So you passed. So those of you who did continuous certification this year, I don't know if there's anybody, I know that I see a few other fellow directors in the room, so I know they took it as well. Then you are enrolled in the new continuous certification program, where there's a decrease in the number of overall CMEs that you need to turn in a 5-year period, down so 125 instead of 150. So kind of reflecting that in the process of taking this exam, you are, in a sense, doing CME. We're not granting CME. In addition, there's no self-assessment CME requirements in the new program. Again, that this exam is very much a self-assessment exam, and so there's no need for us to collect, as the board, other self-assessment CMEs. CME still must be related to your practice, and if you are doing CME for state board requirements, then we will take those as well. So let me tell you a little bit about how this exam went for the nearly 2,200 diplomates who took it this last fall. So the first time, and I was one of them, and I would say I was nervous. I knew the pass rate on the old exam was in the high 90s, and felt I knew how to pass that exam. And I knew this exam was going to be tough because it was going to be a different format. And so of these different 4 modules, so everybody took the 20-quart general surgery, and then there was these 4 modules of comprehensive general surgery, breast, alimentary, and abdomen. You can see the distribution. So more diplomates took, twice as many took abdomen versus breast, but the overall pass rate for all of them was 98% or greater. And so it was really that kind of 2 times going through, being able to take the exam, gave a very high pass rate, as you would expect with an open book exam and 2 chances to answer a question. So but we got great reviews on Twitter and social media from diplomates who had taken it, saying that they really felt it was reflective of their practice. They really felt it met their needs. They felt that the board had listened to all the dissatisfiers, and and that it was a worthwhile exam. And I'll show you a little more objective data. And also on the ACS communities, for those who hang out in the ACS communities, the board was not very popular about a year and a half ago, but this was a definite turnaround in terms of how the board, at least for the people who posted there, felt responsive. So this is what did people say at the end of the exam when they finished it, and we compared it to people who took the 10-year assessment in 2017, that secure exam, to our new 40-question self-assessment exam. And so we said, was this relevant to your practice? So in 2017, 30% said yes, it was relevant to my practice. With the new exam, 63% agreed that it was relevant to their practice. Very few people disagreed. I think there were a lot of neutrals in the middle. Do you think that this would improve your practice? So this is now a disagree. So the old 10-year exam, 43% felt that it would not improve their practice. Studying for that exam and taking that exam was going to have no impact on their practice. In the new 2018 exam, only 11% said that they did disagree that taking that exam and the process of studying would not improve their practice. So a big improvement there. Is it a fair exam? So we went from 44 to 78% of diplomates feeling that it was a fair exam. And was the material timely? Was the stuff that we were testing on timely? And we went from 46 to 76% on was the material timely? And then we wanted to know a little bit about how burdensome was this new exam format to people. And we said, how many days did you take away from work in terms of studying for the exam, taking the exam, things like that? How burdensome was this to your practice? So in 2017, about 50% of people said they took less than 3 days off of work to prepare and take the exam. And in 2018, almost 90% said they took less than 3 days away from work. Now, there's a caveat here. This is an exam you have to take every 2 years, so where the other one was only every 10 years. So it's hard to really compare apples and oranges in how much time people really would take away from work to prepare for this exam. 64% said they plan to change something in their practice based on what they learned during the exam, and 78% would recommend it to a colleague or a fellow diplomate. 89% said it was easy to complete. So this is a new thing, right? You're taking an exam online, IT, making sure that people had to be on a certain browser in order to be able to take the exam, that our diplomates were all able to accomplish that. And we said, was this, exam too easy? So nobody thought the exam was too easy. This is not an easy exam, but they felt it was about right, that it was a fair exam. And with a 99% pass rate, I think it wasn't a 99% pass rate because it was easy, but it was fair and people had an opportunity to learn. So the ABS directors who took it, there are several of us in the room. We all committed to entering this program, even though we had certificates that were not expiring for years. But we were a little slow to enroll in this exam. So I can't remember, the window opened maybe in September, and you had to enroll by the end of October or something. And at the American College of Surgeons, less than half the diplomates had enrolled yet. And I think we were all concerned about failing the exam. That at the time it would take to study, and was it really, did we really want to start this process and have to start taking an exam every 2 years? But ultimately all the directors did enroll and pass, and their sentiment at the end of the process was really similar to the rest of the diplomate feedback that I shared with you, that it really was a worthwhile thing, a well-done exam, a kind of a Herculean effort to put together this type of exam in 1 year and have it in a way that would be valid. So continuous certification is definitely more convenient and beneficial to the diplomates than our old exam process, and the goal is to be flexible so that it supports the diplomates and values their time and resources, but continuing to uphold our commitment to patients and the public to maintain high standards. And I would submit this is by surgeons, for surgeons. We're your colleagues. We don't stay on the board forever. We go back into the regular diplomate status as well. But these are really incredibly professional, hardworking people trying to get this right for us and for our public. So I think the last thing that the board really needs to answer and is putting some resources into this is, does certification matter? Can we prove that you're holding your that you are certified by the American Board of Surgery? Does that matter to you, to your patients, to your hospital? So this is a first kind of venture into that area, a study done by Dr. Malangoni and a couple of what we call the psychos, which are the psychometricians, who look at all the how we perform, how the questions perform, and they looked at whether you were in maintenance of certification, so beyond your initial certification, and loss of licensure actions across the country. And this is the first study that for surgery that links an association of maintaining continuous certification in general surgery with that if you maintain that, you're less likely to have a lapse in your licensure. And whether they're truly related or whether it really just speaks to the individual who's maintaining certification and staying up to date, it's also upholding other professionalism standards. So practice oversight, I'm sorry to say, is definitely here to stay. I think we all feel it. We all feel it's more rigorous, and I think it's better for surgeons to self-regulate than to let some other body take over this process. And we really do need to demonstrate to the public that we are current in our practice with meaningful assessments. And I think I would close this with, what do you want in your surgeon? If you're going to have an operation, what would you want? What would the qualities be that you want in your surgeon? And I think you would want a surgeon like Dr. Laus, the Dr. Laus that I knew. And it's really an honor and a privilege to give this lecture in his honor. Thank you.